In 1939, Captain Gustav Schroder attempted to save just over 900 Jewish refugees from the horrors of Nazi Germany. Since 1933, the Nazis had been establishing a vast network of concentration camps and ghettos, setting the stage for the deadliest genocide in history. Just under 6 million Jews would die, and 5 million others, including ethnic Poles, Soviet POWs, Serbs, Romani, Freemasons, disabled people, Slovenians, gays, Jehovah's Witnesses, and Spanish Republicans. But those aboard the MS St. Louis had high hopes of escaping the oppression and violence already underway in Europe, and find refuge in the New World. The passengers had purchased landing certificates and transit visas for a then US-friendly Cuba. Failing that, there was always the immigrant-friendly United States, or its goody-two-shoes sister nation to the north. The Holocaust would take the lives of millions either way, but if the St. Louis succeeded in its voyage, there would be salvation for 937. But that's not what happened. A poem by Emma Lazarus called The New Colossus is engraved on a bronze plaque and mounted on the Statue of Liberty. The second stanza reads, "Keep ancient lands your storied pomp," cries she with silent lips. "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these the homeless tempest-tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door." Captain Gustav Schroder would soon be counting on this to mean something, but when the ship set sail from Hamburg on May 13, 1939, the passengers were totally unaware that the Cuban president, Federico Laredo Bru, had issued Decree 937 a week prior. The decree retroactively invalidated all recently issued landing certificates. Entry to Cuba would now require written authorization from the Cuban Secretaries of State and Labor, and the posting of a $500 bond. By this time, the Cubans had already accepted about 2,500 Jewish refugees, and many resented the relatively large number of refugees entering the country at this time. Like many countries, Cuba was suffering from the Great Depression, and refugees were seen as competitors for a dwindling number of jobs. Jews were often labeled as communists, and 5 days before the ship departed, Cuba had its largest anti-Semitic demonstration in history, with over 40,000 spectators. A former Cuban president, Grau San Martin, sponsored the rally, where one of his spokesmen, Primitivo Rodriguez, told Cubans to fight the Jews until the last one is driven out. The St. Louis arrived in Havana on May 27th. Only 29 passengers were allowed to disembark, 4 Spanish citizens, 2 Cuban nationals, 22 Jews with valid US visas, and 1 passenger who was brought to hospital after attempting to commit suicide. The remaining 907 refugees would have to go elsewhere. But the St. Louis would find the United States in much the same mood as Cuba. The Great Depression had left millions out of work and fearful of competition with refugees or immigrants. In 1939, the vast majority of Americans opposed joining World War II and opposed relaxing restrictions on immigration. 3 months prior to the voyage of the St. Louis, a bill to allow the admission of 20,000 additional Jewish children from Germany died in committee. Sailing north along Florida's coast, passengers cabled President FDR asking for refuge. He did not respond, but one passenger received a message from the State Department instructing them to wait their turns on the waiting list to qualify for entry. Because of immigration quotas established back in 1924, that waiting list was several years long. Behind the scenes, Cordell Hull, Secretary of State, advised President Roosevelt not to accept the Jews. And when Captain Schroder sailed close to Florida's coastline, Hull instructed the U.S. Coast Guard to follow the ship closely to prevent refugees from jumping ship and swimming ashore. Several other attempts to find refuge in Latin America failed. Then a group of Canadian academics and clergy tried to persuade Prime Minister William Lyon Mackenzie King to allow the passengers safe haven in the Great White North. Chief among their opponents was Frederick Charles Blair, Canada's Director of Immigration, who in a 1938 letter boasted about his careful control of pressure by Jewish people to get into Canada. Mackenzie King sided with Blair, and the St. Louis returned across the Atlantic, finally docking in Belgium on June 17th with all 907 passengers still on board.
The liner St. Louis, turned back from Cuba, brings its human cargo to port at last. 907 Jewish unfortunates without a country, permitted to land in Belgium after 5 weeks of suspense afloat.
The UK agreed to take 288 of the passengers. Those would be the lucky ones, out of reach from Nazi Germany throughout the war. The remaining 619 were accepted by France, Belgium, and the Netherlands. The next year, these countries would be occupied by Nazi Germany. An estimated 254 of these refugees died during the Holocaust.